The day I discovered Richard's affair was like any other, until it wasn't. I, Anna, 32, always considered myself observant, but that day my skills were put to a test I never anticipated. Returning home early from work, I was met with a sight that froze me in my tracks. The garage shutter, always firmly closed, was ajar. Puzzled, I approached cautiously, my heart pounding an erratic rhythm against my chest. Peering inside, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. There, in the midst of our garage, was Richard's prized vintage sports car, and in it, entangled in a passionate embrace, were Richard and a woman I didn't recognize. The audacity of it, in our shared space, was a slap across my face. I stifled a gasp, biting my lip till it hurt. They couldn't know I was there. I needed evidence, something concrete. My mind raced as I struggled to think straight amidst the turmoil of betrayal. Then, as if fate played its hand, Richard's voice cut through the silence. "Come on, the car's too cramped. Let's do it outside next time. Right?" His tone, light and carefree, was a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. It was the voice of a man without a care in the world, a man who didn't deserve the loyalty I had given him. I had to act. Moving silently, I grabbed a few of Richard's clothes strewn on the floor and snatched the garage remote control. My hands trembled, but my resolve was firm. I pressed the button and the shutter began its slow descent. "You too? So ardently engaged like monkeys. Deserve to be left just as you are, with nothing on, fitting for your behavior," I whispered to myself, a bitter taste in my mouth. I left the garage, closing them in their disgrace. I couldn't bear to stay a moment longer. The evidence in my hand was my ticket to freedom from this sham of a marriage. I had always known that Richard had a penchant for theatrics, but this was a new low. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about the disrespect, the utter disregard for our marriage vows. As I walked away, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, betrayal, but above all, a burning desire for retribution. Richard had made his bed, and now he was going to lie in it. This wasn't just the end of our marriage, it was the beginning of his downfall. I was going to make sure of that. In the quiet of my office the next day, my mind incessantly replayed the previous night's events. Every casual smile and tender word from Richard now seemed like a carefully crafted performance. How long had I been living in this facade? I sat there, looking at the desktop background, a photo of us on our wedding day. It felt like looking at two strangers. I deleted it with a click, a small but liberating act. The memories of our life together took on a different hue now. Richard, with his charming smile and words, had always been particular about appearances. Our home, an aging yet elegant house, was chosen by him for its character, he had said. But now I saw it for what it was, a stage for his performance. I recalled the day he brought home that vintage sports car, a purchase that came out of nowhere. "It's a man's dream," he had proclaimed. That car, which cost more than a small house, was his pride and joy. Now, it was nothing more than a symbol of his vanity and deceit. As my professional facade held up at work, my personal life crumbled. I was a successful marketing director, known for my sharp strategies and keen insights. But at that moment, I felt like a fool. Fooled by a man I trusted with my heart. The memory of an encounter with Richard at a corporate event a few months ago resurfaced. He was the center of attention, laughing and socializing with his usual flair. I had seen him exchange numbers with a young woman, but he had brushed it off as a business contact. How naive I had been. The day wore on, and every interaction felt like a chore. My colleague Mark noticed my distraction. "Everything okay, Anna?" he asked, genuine concern in his eyes. I forced a smile. "Just a long day," I replied, masking my turmoil. As I drove home, my thoughts were interrupted by a call from Richard. His voice, once comforting, now grated on my nerves. "Hey, love, running late tonight. Don't wait up," he said casually. "Sure," I replied, my voice steady. I wasn't going to confront him yet. I needed a plan, something that would hit him where it hurt the most, his ego and his wallet. That night, alone in our bed, I made a decision. Richard's betrayal wasn't just going to be the end of our marriage, it was going to be the start of his undoing. I was going to dismantle the life he so carefully built, piece by piece. Sitting in the dim light of my living room that evening, I initiated the plan I had been meticulously crafting. The laptop on my knees displayed the login screen to our home security system, a system Richard had installed for the safety of his precious car. Logging in, I navigated to the garage camera footage. My heart raced as I hit play, watching the scene unfold with a cold detachment. There they were, Richard and that woman, Lily, entangled in their sordid affair. The footage was damning, undeniable evidence of his betrayal. I downloaded the video, a digital weapon in my arsenal for the impending legal battle. Richard's reputation, his precious image, was about to be shattered. The next day at work, I was a shell of my usual self, my mind constantly on the impending confrontation. Mark approached my desk with a hesitant step. "Anna, you've been off. Anything I can do?" I shook my head, forcing a half smile. "Just a tough project. Thanks, though." As the day dragged on, my resolve only strengthened. Richard was not going to get away with this unscathed. That evening, Richard returned home with his usual carefree demeanor. "Hey, babe, I picked up Chinese for dinner. Thought you'd like a break from cooking." His words, once sweet, now felt like poison. I sat down at the dining table, my expression unreadable. "We need to talk, Richard." He paused, a flicker of concern crossing his face. "Everything okay?" I pushed my laptop across the table. The video queued up. "Why don't you tell me?" Richard's face paled as the video played. His eyes darted from the screen to my face, searching for some sign of forgiveness. "Anna, this isn't what it looks like," he stammered, his usual eloquence gone. I leaned back, my voice calm but laced with venom. "Oh, I think it's exactly what it looks like, Richard, you cheating on me, in our own home." Richard scrambled for words, his mask crumbling. "It was a mistake. I love you, Anna. We can work through this." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "Work through this? There's nothing left to work through. I want a divorce, Richard, and I want you to suffer for what you've done." His face contorted in a mix of anger and panic. "You can't do this to me. Think about our reputation, our social standing. That's all you care about, isn't it? Your precious reputation. Well, it's about to come crashing down." I stood up, my decision final. "I'll be contacting my lawyer in the morning. I suggest you do the same." Richard sat there, a defeated man, as I walked away. The web of lies he had woven was unraveling, and I was going to make sure it ensnared him in the end. In the days that followed, my home felt like a battleground, charged with silent tension and unspoken words. Richard tried to regain control, alternating between desperate pleas and veiled threats. But I was unmoved, my resolve as firm as steel. At work, I maintained my professional facade, but the weight of the situation was a constant shadow. During a meeting, I found my thoughts drifting, only to be brought back by Mark's concerned voice. "Anna, you sure you're okay? You seem distracted." I brushed it off with a strained smile. "Just a lot on my mind. I'll be fine." But the truth was far from it. I was planning my next move, a move that would ensure Richard paid for his betrayal. The more he tried to sweet-talk his way out of the situation, the more resolute I became. One evening, as Richard returned from work, his usual mask of confidence was replaced by an air of defeat. He slumped into a chair, looking at me with weary eyes. "Anna, can't we talk about this? I know I messed up, but we can fix it." His words fell on deaf ears. I had heard enough of his lies. "There's nothing left to discuss, Richard. I've made up my mind." He leaned forward, desperation in his voice. "You're going to destroy everything we've built. Think about what people will say." "People? Is that all you care about? What about us, Richard? What about our marriage?" He fell silent, unable to answer. His concern for public image had always overshadowed our relationship. The next day, I sought solace with Mrs. Harper, my mentor and confidant. She listened intently as I poured out my heart. "You need a break from all this, Anna," she advised. "Why not take that international project? Get away for a while." The idea was appealing. A chance to escape the suffocating atmosphere at home and put some distance between Richard and me. I made the decision. I was going to take the project and use the opportunity to gather my strength for the impending legal battle. It was also a chance to rebuild myself away from the shadow of Richard's deceit. That evening, I informed Richard of my decision. His reaction was a mix of surprise and frustration. "You're leaving now? In the middle of all this?" "Yes, Richard. I need to focus on my career, something you clearly never respected." He watched helplessly as I packed my bags. For the first time, I saw a hint of fear in his eyes, fear of losing control, fear of facing the consequences alone. As I left for the airport, I felt a sense of freedom. The distance would give me perspective and strength. Richard's web of lies had been torn apart, and now it was time to rebuild my life on my terms. The international project was a breath of fresh air, a much-needed escape from the stifling situation back home. Immersed in work, I found a renewed sense of purpose and strength. Each successful meeting, every new connection, was a step towards reclaiming my independence. However, Richard's shadow loomed large, even miles away. His texts and calls, a mix of pleading and anger, were relentless. I responded only when necessary, keeping my replies brief and emotionless. One evening, after a particularly long day, my phone buzzed with yet another call from Richard. I hesitated but answered, bracing myself for another bout of emotional manipulation. "Anna, where are you? This is getting ridiculous. You can't just run away from our problems." Richard's voice was strained, a mix of frustration and desperation. I replied coolly, "I'm not running away, Richard. I'm focusing on my career, something I should have done a long time ago." "You're abandoning our marriage over one mistake. You're being unreasonable," he retorted. "A mistake? Richard, you betrayed our marriage. This isn't just a simple error you can sweep under the rug." His voice rose, tinged with anger. "You're destroying our life over your pride. Come back and we can sort this out. We'll go to therapy, do whatever it takes." I could almost see him, the charming man I married, trying to weave his web of lies again. But that man was long gone, replaced by the reality of who he truly was. "Therapy won't fix what you broke, Richard. I'm filing for divorce. It's over." There was a moment of silence, and then his voice, now colder. "You'll regret this, Anna. You're making a huge mistake." I ended the call, a sense of finality washing over me. It was clear now. There was no salvaging what was left. Richard was only concerned about his image, his comfort. He didn't truly care about us or our marriage. Back in my hotel room, I looked out at the city lights, reflecting on the path ahead. The divorce would be messy, no doubt. Richard would fight it, perhaps out of spite or fear of losing his public persona. But I was ready for it. I had gathered enough evidence, and with my career thriving, I was financially secure. As the days passed, I grew more determined. Richard's attempts to reach out became more infrequent, his messages a mix of self-pity and veiled threats, but they no longer affected me. I was moving forward, leaving the shadow of our failed marriage behind. Upon my return, the reality of my crumbling marriage hit me like a tidal wave. The house, once a symbol of our shared dreams, now felt like a prison of memories best forgotten. I moved into a modest apartment, a space that was mine alone, free from Richard's deceitful presence. The day of our final confrontation arrived sooner than I expected. Richard, looking more disheveled than I had ever seen him, had requested to meet under the guise of discussing the terms of our divorce. As I sat across from him in the sterile environment of a lawyer's office, I felt a surge of power. This was my territory, my rules. Richard started with his usual charm, but there was a hint of desperation in his voice. "Anna, can't we settle this amicably? Think about the years we spent together." His words were like echoes from a past life. "Amicable? After what you've done? You must be joking," I replied, my voice steady. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, then leaned forward. "What do you want, Anna? Money? The house? Just name it." I looked him straight in the eyes. "I want justice, Richard. You don't get to buy your way out of this." His facade cracked, revealing the selfish man I had come to know. "You're ruining my life over this. I hope you're happy." "Happy? No, Richard, but I will have peace knowing you can't hurt me anymore." The negotiation was tense, with Richard trying to manipulate every term in his favor, but I stood my ground, backed by solid evidence and a resolute legal team. As we neared the end of the meeting, Richard's demeanor changed. He was no longer the confident man I had married. Instead, he was a man cornered by his own actions, lashing out in a futile attempt to regain control. "This is a mistake, Anna. You'll regret this," he hissed, his eyes dark with anger. "I already regret many things, Richard. Letting you control my life for so long is one of them. This divorce is not a mistake. It's a correction." With the final papers signed, I walked out of the office feeling lighter than I had in years. The chains of our toxic marriage were finally broken. Richard had lost more than just a wife. He had lost the respect of his peers, the facade of the perfect husband, and soon he would face the full consequences of his actions in the eyes of the law and society. I had not only survived Richard's betrayal, but emerged stronger, more determined. The chapter of my life that included him was closed, and a new, promising chapter was waiting to be written. The months following the divorce were a whirlwind. I had successfully navigated the legal labyrinth, emerging victorious but not unscathed. The divorce was more than just a legal separation. It was a reclaiming of my identity, my independence. In my new apartment, each morning brought a sense of renewal. I relished the freedom, the quiet, and the space to think and plan my future. My career, which had always been a source of pride, now became my focus. I dove into my work with a renewed vigor, finding solace in my achievements. News of Richard's downfall spread like wildfire. His reputation, once his most prized possession, was now tarnished. His professional life suffered as clients and colleagues distanced themselves. The man who had thrived on control and appearances was now struggling to keep his world from crumbling. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he had sold the vintage sports car, a symbol of his vanity, to cover legal expenses. It was a poetic end to the object that had once been a catalyst for our downfall. One evening, as I sat sipping coffee in my living room, I reflected on the journey. The pain, the betrayal, and the fight had transformed me. I was no longer the woman who had naively believed in Richard's lies. I was stronger, wiser, and more determined. A call from Mrs. Harper, who had been my rock throughout the ordeal, interrupted my thoughts. "Anna, how are you holding up?" "Better than ever," I replied, a genuine smile on my face. "That's wonderful to hear. You know, there's an opening for a senior position in the company's overseas branch. I think you'd be perfect for it." The offer took me by surprise. It was an opportunity I had always dreamed of but never pursued, held back by the confines of my marriage. I don't know what to say, Mrs. Harper. It's a big step. A step you're more than ready for, Anna. You've proven your strength and resilience. It's time to take on the world. I let the words sink in. This was more than just a job offer. It was a chance to start anew, to build a life on my terms, free from the shadows of the past. "I'll do it," I said, my voice steady with resolve. "It's time for a new adventure." As I ended the call, I looked around my apartment, a space that had become my sanctuary. It was time to leave it behind, to embark on a new journey. Richard's betrayal had shattered my world, but in its place I had built something stronger, something truly my own. As I packed my bags for the move, I felt a sense of excitement for the future, a future that was mine to shape.